Izzy. It began in 1898 when I returned back to England after living in America for 3 years. A year after I returned, when the war broke out in October, Leonard Courtney, the president of the Women's Branch of South African Conciliation Committee, invited me to join his committee. After joining, I realized that it was something I was very passionate about, and decided to do some more research and started my own fund, the South African Women and Children Distress Fund.
Well, on December 7th, 1900, I sailed across the ocean and arrived in Cape Town 20 days later. A long trip, but definitely worth the wait. At the time, I felt as though it was necessary to get a full understanding of what it was like for the people living in these camps. Funds can only go so far, and I felt a true connection with what I was studying and knew I had to make a bigger difference. So I found out about some camps such as Johannesburg, Bloemfontein, Potchefstroom, Norwelspan, Kroonstad, Irene, etc. Soon after, I was asking for permission to visit them. I received a yes from Lord Milner, subject to the approval of Lord Kitchener. They explained I could not go past Bloemfontein, so I quickly obliged and headed for the camp straight away.
Seen before. I must explain first that I expected something disgusting. However, nothing as horrendous as what I saw. The camp was dumped down on the southern slope of a small hill. In this camp, there were about 2,000 people living there, mostly women and children with a few surrendered men. The entire camp was inadequate for the amount of people it held. 8, 10, or 12 people squeezed in a bell tent. Can you imagine during a storm or overwhelming heat what it must have felt like living in such close quarters? The water supply was not nearly enough to fulfill the needs of thousands of people. No bedspread or mattresses. Fuel had to be collected by the people themselves. Sickness was a huge issue. Very few tents didn't have at least one sick adult or child. Illnesses such as measles, bronchitis, pneumonia, dysentery, and typhoid led to death in many circumstances. It was just horrible. Faults. However, this was not their first approach. Initially, these camps were refuge for civilian families who had been forced to abandon their homes for one or other reasons related to the war. However, after the British continued to take over South African lands, they quickly turned into these distraught, overpopulated concentration camps. Overall, I do believe it is the British generals' fault, because the conditions the surrendered Boer people were living in were so horrible that it is inexcusable for the generals.